the PSAT or the NMSQT, the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, can be given to 10th or 11th grade students. And students who typically take the PSAT or the NMSQT in the 11th grade may meet the requirements to enter the National Merit Scholarship Program. And this is an academic competition for recognition and scholarships. And the PSAT NMSQT is designed to help prepare students for the SAT, college and careers. So that's a little bit of background on the PSAT, not the PSAT 8-9. So I'm going to pass it right now to Winter Jones, who is our District Career Readiness Specialist, and she'll be filling us in this evening on what the PSAT is and give us some additional information about the PSAT. Winter?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening. Just wanted to give some recent updates on the SAT that have been happening over the past couple of years. In 2020, the University of California, so our UC system, our California public colleges, they were test optional. So they were allowing students to send SAT scores if they had them. And then they were ordered to stop using SAT or ACT scores for that matter. That's a different company that also hosts a college entrance exam. They were ordered to stop using them for admission or scholarships decisions in response to a lawsuit citing equity issues. And some of that had to do with a lot of SAT center closures due to the pandemic. That decision was upheld by the court in 2021. And that shift by the UC, ordered by the courts, aligns with action that had already been taken by the CSUs of their own accord. So our 23 California state universities, also another one of our public California systems, they had already gone that route, realizing that taking the SAT at that time was not equitable for all students. So that follows an emerging trend by private and out-of-state colleges nationwide to stop using the SAT in admissions decisions. Right now, more than 1,400 accredited colleges and universities nationwide will not require students to submit test scores when applying for fall 2020 admissions. So that would be our current seniors. And that represents more than 60% now of undergraduate institutions in the United States. And this is a rapidly growing number. We use a website called fairtest.org where students and families and counselors can look at specific colleges or college systems and see which colleges have discontinued the requirement of the SAT or the ACT. And colleges now that this test factor is out of their admissions equations are all moving much more toward a comprehensive review of a student. So what classes a student is taking in high school, what grades they're earning, what extracurricular activities they're engaging in, the essays that they sometimes submit with college applications, letters of recommendation, et cetera. So, and I just wanted to point out, it's very interesting, when I was doing research, compiling a list of colleges across the country that were no longer requiring the test for admissions, I ran into an interesting state. The state of Colorado had a state law requiring the colleges to require an SAT or an ACT score in their admissions decisions. And during the pandemic, the colleges in Colorado, which are fairly popular with our students here in Pleasanton, the colleges appealed to the state and asked them to reconsider that law because students from all over the country and all over the world really were not getting access to an SAT center. And the state of Colorado has overturned their own law, and they no longer require their colleges to require that exam. So that's just kind of one extreme example of the shift that's happening with the college and the admissions testing. And now I will pass it to Ms. Graywall.
Actually, I believe Dr. Woodward had a slide before.
Oh,
sorry. Thank you, Winter.
Sorry, it helps if I'm off mute. Thank you. So in light of the actions that were taken by our post-secondary institutions around the country, which also align to our commitment to equity, we think that the relevance of the PSAT as a practice test for 8th grade students to prepare for the SAT has greatly diminished for our students. And since the primary reason for students to take the PSAT in 2021 is to qualify, or 2022, for the National Merit Scholarship, we are offering this to our 10th and 11th grade students as a practice to our 10th grade students as a practice exam, and to our 11th grade students so that they can qualify if they desire to try to do that, to be a National Merit Scholar. So at this time, we're thinking that there are quite a number of reasons why it is not necessarily advantageous to our 8th grade students to take the test right now. So now I'll go ahead and pass it to our Director of Secondary Education, Ms. Graywall, who will take it from here.
Thank you, Dr. Woodward. And thank you, Ms. Jones, for the background on the SAT and the testing. From a curriculum standpoint, I'd like to share that the PSAT 8 is not used to inform high school course placement or to determine AP potential in high school for middle school students going into high school. It is not used by 8th grade teachers to identify instructional needs, and it is not factored into a student's grades. In addition, the exam, which can take approximately 4 hours to administer at the middle schools, can be disruptive to the school's daily schedule, and it also results in considerable loss of instructional time. Thank you. And in addition to that loss of instructional time, other concerns that we have with administering the PSAT 8 include that this exam lacks a direct connection to California state standards taught in PUSD schools. We're seeking to maximize instructional time for our students, particularly to increase their engagement and connection, rather than have our 8th graders sit for a 4-hour optional exam. If students do not feel adequately prepared for the PSAT, or some of them experience great stress during this test, which is at a college level or a college entrance level, they may not score well, and we're concerned that that could lead to possible feelings of failure and further academic disengagement for our students. In consultation with our middle school administrative teams, many of whom are represented here and in this group on this panel, we would like to avoid the potential negative impact on student mental health at a time when our primary goals are to ensure student wellness, to reconnect, to build their confidence, to restore, and to increase their engagement in school, to reimagine their connection with school as they return to full in-person instruction. So that's the curriculum background. With that, I'd like to turn it to Dr. Pam Van de Kamp, who is our Director of Assessment Accountability, to discuss other measures of academic progress that are available to PUSD students and parents in 8th grade. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Ms. Graywall. So as the Director of Assessment and Accountability, I can talk a little bit about what we do have in place for our 8th grade students. And since last year, our Board of Education adopted the MAP growth assessments, which is provided through the NWEA. And these are taken 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. These assessments start in 2nd grade for math and then 3rd grade for reading. And we are able to see student growth over time. So this is a really useful assessment. It informs instruction. It also helps us as district leaders to look at our programs. And it also helps our students and our families to learn more about their students' progress and their proficiency. So some of the facts about our MAP growth assessment: it is aligned to our California state standards and the Common Core. It's adaptive, so that two students will not get the same test. As they answer a question correctly, the test will become a little bit more challenging. As they answer the question incorrectly, it becomes a little easier. So it's really moving them up and down a scale, much like a measuring stick, so that we can see what they are ready to learn today. What are they ready for instruction? And so that's that question complexity. And it continues to move forward. It moves that student forward throughout the test. And we found that typically students take about an hour to complete the assessment. Some take longer. Especially we see our higher performing students may take more time because they are able to get that high level of question complexity. And the software, the algorithm within that program adjusts that difficulty of the test. So each student really takes a unique test. So they are able to learn from this test, and we are able to see what they are ready for in instruction. That student achievement is measured on a RIT scale, which is a Roush unit scale, a norm reference scale, which is based on the performance of students across the country who are also taking the MAP growth assessment. And this way we determine, much like a measuring stick, where they are on their growth chart. So what we see is that students may progress throughout their academic career and move up that scale. Much like our students get taller every year, they'll move up that scale. Sometimes they may move back a little bit. We see from spring to fall, sometimes that there's a dip. That's that summer dip. But it has a lot of information for teachers about how to create that instruction that is just right for each student. And it also helps to group students. So if they're looking at some of their differentiation, the instruction that they have in their classroom, different students might have different tasks based on what they're ready to learn. And so we're able to see that progress over time because they take it 3 times a year for a number of years. It's designed to target that student's academic performance in mathematics and reading. And we can see student growth from year to year. What I really appreciate as a former principal is being able to sit down with parents and look at, here's where your student was in 2nd grade, in 3rd grade, in 4th grade, and being able to share with parents how their students are making progress throughout the academic standards. Each student has that opportunity to know what they know and what they can do. And they develop stretch goals through this. So often teachers can have a conference with that student and then talk about what is it that they need to do based on this assessment to make progress on their growth chart. It also has the ability to indicate the projected proficiency on the CASP, on the SAT, and the ACT. So that's part of the student profile that families or that teachers are able to view. Teachers use it to identify student strengths and then what are their gaps in understanding. And just thinking about this past year in 2021 and the gaps that were created because of the lack of instructional time, teachers were working as hard as they can, but we know that there are gaps for each of our students. It's able to identify those, and then teachers can plan instruction for groups of students or for their whole class based on this information. And those findings are then applied to instructional planning. So what I want to share here is the MAP Growth Family Report. And this might be familiar to many of you. It's available in the parent portal of Q. So if you go into your students, into your parent portal in our student information system, which is Q, and you look under the Documents tab, you should be able to access this MAP growth information. It gives an overview of what the MAP growth is, so some of the information that I just shared with you. It also gives that individual student achievement. It shows where they fall on a percentile scale from 1 or from 0 to 99. And then it also shows that progress, right? The achievement for your student. And these are made available at the beginning of October because our testing window ends on September 30th. So we want to show how is your student also performing compared to other students across the district who are in their grade level. So we get a RIT score for our district at each grade level, and we're able to share that with families. So you can kind of see that measurement as well. Each of those areas of math and reading are broken down into goal areas. So you can see that there are 3 goal areas for math, and then there's 4 for math and 3 for reading. And so you're able to see what those goal areas are. And then it also talks about not just achievement, but growth. So you can see how students are making progress over time, right? This shows, for example, how they did in the fall of 2019, how they did in winter of 2020. Of course, we were not able to administer the assessment due to COVID-19 in the spring of 2020, but we went back to it again in the fall and the winter. And so you should be able to see in the document that's currently in queue, you should be able to see those spring 2021 scores as well. And then once the fall window closes, we'll be able to provide those and upload them into queue. So we don't have to worry about sites sending them out. They'll be there available for you. And then it shares some instructional applications. So some things that you can do as parents to follow up, and then some ways that you can have a conversation with your teacher as well. What's really one of the great benefits that I think teachers really appreciate and we appreciate is that it's aligned to digital tools that we have in place. So things like Edgenuity, Learning A to Z for our elementary, Study Sync for our middle school students. We've also added several digital resources as well, including News ELA. And so these are opportunities for your student in class for the teacher to find what is their level, what is that area of instruction that they are ready for today. And then these digital resources can match that level. And so they're able to have some of those resources available to them with the support of their teacher. So this is something that's available if you go into Q in your parent portal and look under the Documents tab, you should be able to find it. And so these will also be available hopefully in the first week or 2 weeks of October. We'll try and get those out for every parent in there as well. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Woodward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Van de Kamp, and thank you, everybody. Dr. Van de Kamp, could you please refresh the slide deck because I've added a few things to this last one.
Perfect. Let me go ahead and do that.
Excellent. Okay, so right now we'd like to hear your feedback, and there are a couple of ways that you can give us some feedback. We are going to ask that everybody would please complete the PSAT information session feedback form, and you'll see that there's a QR code right here. And if you want to just hold your phone up to it, you can just snap a photo, and then there's a very short, I promise you it's a very short form, but it will allow us to hear from you. Another way you can give feedback or ask some questions for the group is to put your question in the chat, and the host will see it and he will read the question and then someone will respond. So Mr. Gannon, do we have any questions in the chat?
While we're waiting, Dr. Woodward, would you mind sharing who else is on our panel with
Absolutely. I'm sorry about that. So right now we have Director Graywall. She is a secondary director. We have Dr. Van de Kamp, Director of Assessment and Accountability. You've already met Winter Jones, who is our college readiness specialist. And we have Patrick Gannon, who is leading this behind the scenes. We have Monica Wharton, who is a counselor or has been a counselor at the middle school and supports our district and our students in a variety of ways with social and emotional learning. Mary Giza is a vice principal at Hart. Stephanie Pavlenko was a vice principal at PMS last year, and now she's a principal at Moore Elementary School. Thank you all for being here. So from this group is a great wealth of knowledge and experience. Several of our administrators have actually seen and observed our students as they're taking the PSAT in the 8th grade and can share with you a little bit about the impact. And I do see a question in the chat. Will we be sending you the slide deck? Yes, I have it, and I'll drop it in the chat right now. Okay, let's see. So I see a question. Could you please let us know about other competitive exams that are offered to 8th grade students at the PUSD? Do we have anybody that would like to answer that?
I can, I'm a little, I need some clarification on what you mean by competitive exams. We do have extracurricular clubs. We have a very robust, at heart, I can speak for, we have a very robust math counts and science Olympiad, and they have competitions within those clubs. But as far as competitive exams in ELA and math, I'd like a little bit more clarification on that question.
I think I can also add to that in terms of an exam that actually measures, in addition to the math exam that measures growth and is very useful. Another exam that will be given at the end of this year is the CASP. And the CASP will be given for students in the 8th grade in math and in language arts. And that the results of that test will be shared with you, and that will definitely indicate how well your child is doing on the California state standards. Okay, let's see.
And I can just add there is a program if students at a younger age feel like they want to see the actual SAT, which it's questionable because of, math levels and things like that. So you'd really want to look into that. But there is a program through the Johns Hopkins University where 8th graders can actually travel to a real SAT site and take the SAT. But please be aware too that there's lots of free practice for the SAT on the College Board website because they're connected with the Khan Academy. And then there's a lot of free prep on there. So there really isn't a need to do that. But that's one program that's available.
So thank you for that, Ms. Jones. I'll tell everyone what we will do. Since I put the link to a copy of our slide deck in the chat, we can update it with a couple of these slides afterwards so that as you access the slide deck, you'll have the website to go to for the College Board and for some of the other resources we were mentioning. So we'll do that for you when we're finished tonight. Okay. Can PSAT be offered to 8th grade students as an optional test? So only students who apply to take it have a chance to take it? This would not be I'll take a stab at this and then anybody else can jump in. When we offer it so that it is given to many students at the same time and it still is disruptive. And so our best thinking right now is that this would not be a direction we would want to go, especially given that there are other ways that our students could take a similar test or could actually travel and take the SAT test at a SAT testing site, and they could get some of the same information from that test in terms of college readiness or that competitive edge. Anybody want to add into that on our panel?
Dr. Woodward, I don't mind adding in. So it is an optional test, but what we're seeing is because of the competitive nature and the competitive nature that we see in PUSD, more students than not are taking it, even if it's not really something that they're ready and geared to take. As an administrator who is giving the test, I did see, and I just want to put this out there, and I know it's not a question, but there are some harmful effects for our 8th graders taking such a high stakes test. They may not be getting the pressure from home, but they're putting the pressure on themselves. So for example, at PMS, when we went to go take our PSAT 8, it happened to land at the same time with the neurovirus. And so I had to postpone the testing. And I had a lot of kids in my office crying because they just needed that test to be over. They had been studying and studying, and the stress was mounting on them, and they were not eating, they were not sleeping, they were not paying attention in class. And this was a large amount of kids that I was seeing. And so I kind of want to put that social emotional piece out there, although it's optional. out of the 8th graders, the majority of them were taking it, and it was creating a lot of stress. So not only was it disruptive for the 4 hours that they had to take it, but it's also disrupting the time coming up to it, because they're taking PSAT prep courses and they're studying all night through it, and they're not paying attention in classes where we really need their focus to be.
And I just could add to that, the PSAT is a practice for the SAT, and the normal timeline for the SAT is it's meant to be taken during the spring of the junior year. So not the fall of the junior year. That's the time for the seniors to be taking it maybe a second time if they feel that they need to. So the normal timeline is PSAT October of the junior year. The students get their results. They know maybe where they need to study. They've been through enough math and enough high school English that the SAT hopefully could be a little less stressful for some students. Then they're taking the SAT in the spring of their junior year, so March, May, or June. And then that gives them the summer to get their scores back and take the SAT one more time if they need to for college admissions, because the colleges, used to take the highest score. Now, keep in mind that over half of the country's colleges are moving away from requiring the SAT at all, and we don't anticipate a shift back to using it. When I was talking about the UCs not using the SAT score anymore by a court order, the UCs have said that they give themselves until 2025 to develop their own test. And they feel that if they can't develop an equitable test by 2025, they will have no test. They will proceed with the holistic comprehensive review that they are using right now in the absence of the test. So my point being that PUSD is allowing 10th graders to practice the PSAT before they take it as a junior, which is really the real practice. I always call it the practice for the practice. So 10th graders can practice that PSAT before they take it as an 11th grader. And a 10th grader is going to have a lot more of that academic material than an 8th grader is going to have. And they're going to have that whole year to prep if they're a potential national merit scholarship and they are seeking that high PSAT score. And then there's actually about 6 opportunities after that they could take the SAT again. But just keep in the back of your mind too that colleges aren't requiring this test anymore. So if a student is not doing well on the test in the first or second time that they take it, it's not something that they may need for all college admissions, including the UCs, including many of the Ivy Leagues, et cetera.
Thank you. So I'm scrolling through the chat right now and some of our questions, and I see that some have already been answered. So one question is that the SAT provided a clear goal to students, which made it somewhat easy in a way. So now, if colleges are not getting or using the SAT, Winter, if you could shed some light on how, in general, for many of our colleges, you mentioned that 50% in our nation are not even looking at the SAT or are test blind. So how exactly should a student approach college admissions now?
I love that question. That's a fabulous question. And remember, if you want to check a particular college to see if they're requiring the test, remember you can use that fairtest.org. It's a great website and it's very up to date. But I think I mentioned when I was presenting a little bit, so that question, how can a student prepare for college admissions if that SAT piece is not such a big chunk? First, I want to say that colleges have always stated that that test score is one small piece of a big college application. It's one small piece. So in taking out that one small piece, the college is not really losing a picture of the student, and they actually might be gaining a better picture of a student who doesn't test well, and that one test score does not represent them. And students who do test well have all these other ways to show a college that they would be a good applicant for their school. So they're going to be looking at the course of study that the student chooses in high school. And remember, we have so many different pathways. Students should be taking classes that they're very interested in. We have all kinds of different choices of pathways. They're going to look at the courses the student is taking. the grades that they're earning with their teachers now that they're working, mostly back in person. They're going to be looking at what the high schools have to offer as far as clubs, sports, committees. Even if there's nothing at school that the student is interested in, the student can get involved with something in their community. Could be their church, could be the local retirement center, could be anything. I mean, anything where the student is passionate and interested. And then many college applications have the essay or the personal insight statements. The UCs call them the personal insight questions, where the student writes 4 little essays in response to 4 questions. And that is where the student is going to fill in all the information that the college may not know about them from just looking at their courses and their grades. And that's a great opportunity for students to write about their passions, their goals, these pathways they've taken in high school, or these things that they've explored outside of high school, whether it be a job, volunteer work, etc. So really, when students follow their passions, that's when they blossom, and that's what comes through on a college application. And I'm so happy that 60% of the colleges in the country have moved away from test scores, because now colleges are looking at students as a person and not a number on a piece of paper.
Thank you for that excellent explanation there. So let's talk about another question, which is how the PSAT 8-9 being used as a talent search qualifying test. And so if we could have you, Winter, shed any light on how this test is used, or anybody who's given it as a talent search, and any other ways that students would be able to demonstrate their capability if they're really interested early on in being highly competitive for colleges or universities, especially in light of the fact that many of them would not be looking at the SAT at all.
Yeah, now on the 11th grade PSAT and MSQT, keep in mind that 10th graders may take it, but it's really just a practice for the actual taking of it in the 11th grade year. On that test, students allow or disallow College Board to release their information to colleges. And that's when colleges start to contact students and maybe send them brochures or send them emails, etc. As far as the PSAT 8 being used as a talent search, the only thing that I'm aware of, and maybe Monica can chime in if she has more information than this, but the only thing that I'm aware of is that Johns Hopkins University program that students can apply to and enter. And that's usually an actual SAT score that a student would travel to and take at an SAT site. And I saw a question in the chat that said, how many times can the student take the SAT? College Board won't limit a student on how many times they can take the SAT, because they make money each time you take it. Sorry, I had to say that. But they won't limit you, but colleges will tell you, particularly, I've heard this from Georgetown University and some other very prestigious universities. They say, take it once, take it one more time if you feel like you need to improve your score, and then stop. They don't like to see students taking it 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So there's no limit on how many times you can take it, but once you are up at the high schools, the counselors will be presenting to you on what colleges say about taking it over and over and over again.
Winter, I just wanted to add to that. I actually looked it up because I couldn't remember the PSAT 8-9 being used as a talent search indicator for 8th and 9th graders. And it looks like students in 3rd through 6th grade are able to take the the PSAT 8-9 as a talent search indicator, but as Winter mentioned, the regular SAT was used as the original Johns Hopkins talent search before College Board instated the PSAT 8-9. And that, I believe, is still the case. And I think certain test centers do open it up for the Johns Hopkins talent search. And students who score well are invited to participate in like some summer courses and things like that. That's what that talent search is, and what the draw was to families and students who wanted to take some summer courses in English and math and so forth.
Thank you. And that's not been offered in that the test that you just mentioned is not something that has been offered at our schools in the past.
For many years, we're going way back. We did for the Johns Hopkins, but I've been in the district for so long, so we're talking a million years ago. So not in recent years.
Thank you. Let's see if there's any other that we haven't answered. Okay. I'm looking through the chat. Yes, we'll share a recording. Yes, the slide deck has been linked in. So I understand correctly, PSAT is not available for 8th graders. As we stated and shared our reasoning for it, we do not feel that this is a good use of the 8th grade students' time. In fact, we feel it can be more harmful than it is beneficial at this time. And they have many opportunities in high school to be able to take a practice test or to take the SAT, as well as the fact that our universities and colleges are moving away from using the SAT at all and looking at other measurements, as Winter stated. I see some shaking heads from some of the members of our panel. Stephanie Pavlenko, would you like to add a little bit more to that?
Yeah, again, to reiterate what I was talking about is, our 8th graders are at this critical point in their lives where they're not quite adults yet, but they don't see themselves as kids. And taking these high stakes tests it's really clamping down on some of their coping mechanisms. And, when they receive these scores back, that when they have trouble interpreting, and then when they feel like they haven't done good enough, it's the team having to come around those kids again and collectively lift them up because they feel like failures, and they're not. Right? It's a practice test, and our kids are missing that this is a practice test for them to be really just exploring. And so from an administrator perspective at a middle school setting, I was seeing more harm than good coming through this test. And those were some really rough times as they were taking the test, and then as they were getting those scores back. It was hard to watch for our kids. And I know they were getting some learning loss happening in the classrooms because they were so fixated on this test and their scores.
I want to just add to that, Stephanie, that, for example, the math portion does look at some algebra in the PSAT 8-9, and not all 8th graders are taking algebra. So kids weren't ready, were feeling underprepared. Parents were stressed about that. And so I agree, as a middle school counselor for many years, that was something that definitely arrived in my office many times. So it was stressful.
Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing those responses. So another question is why, and I'll summarize the question, in years past it was given, but not now. So why was it given to begin with? And so I'm going to answer the question about the PSAT and the original focus that districts had on college and career readiness. And so quite a long time ago, we wanted to make sure that every student was prepared for college and career ready. And the thinking at that time was that this could expose students to a college-like test. This was primarily intended at that time for underserved students who maybe had thought that they would never go to college to have some sort of an experience taking a formal test like this. But in terms of the test actually being used for any purpose in terms of placement or in terms of grades or anything like that, it wasn't used. It wasn't really even looked at carefully. So the value of it ended up in some cases, not necessarily preparing students for college and career, but from discouraging them to want to take a test similar to this in future years, especially if they got their results. and the results were not as strong as they would like, then that has a negative impact on their likelihood to want to take a test like this again. So that's a little bit of the historical background that I can share coming from other districts regarding the PSAT 8. All right. So yes, we will share the recording. We see a thank you as a closing comment in terms of materials that we recommend for students to study. We'll go ahead and add a couple of resources to the slide deck. And since it is a Google slide deck, any resources that we add later or tomorrow, if you check back tomorrow, the slide deck will update and you'll be able to see those resources. And with that, we thank you so much for partnering with us tonight to ask us questions, to provide your input, and it's very helpful. We value your partnership. And we also just want to say how absolutely thrilled we are to have our students back in school. We know it's not a perfect situation. We know that there's still this COVID thing lingering out there, but we are definitely on the right track. Our kids are happy. We hope they're coming home to you happier than they were during remote learning, even though we tried very hard at that time. And we just really care so much about our students, and we care that they have a year in which they are fully connecting to each other, to school, where they feel supported and where they are able to learn at a high and rigorous level academically, but they're able to have fun and feel welcomed and feel like they have their school experience back. And we do not want to compromise that for our wonderful middle school students in any way this year. We want the 8th grade year for them to be the very best year that they've ever had, especially considering that some of them were on a middle school campus for about 5 minutes before we shut down, and they were only 6th graders. So with that, I will close the meeting. Help us get better at what we do by completing the Google form. And we thank you so much. And I thank all our wonderful panelists for being a part of this discussion. Have a good night and be safe and wear a mask.